Despite a resurgence of the disease in New South Wales, the Premier is determined to avoid a strict lockdown like we saw a few months ago. Do you think that that's warranted?
I think it's a good thing to aspire to avoid. We'll have to see how high the case count gets on a daily basis. And there's obviously some point at which you can't have the virus running rampant throughout the community. That's the most destructive thing in terms of the economy, in terms of consumer and business confidence. So if we can avoid it with the current strategy, that's excellent, but we'll have to see how things develop.
Do you think that current strategy is working? Do you think we're seeing enough productivity in the economy to allow for us to continue as we are going at the moment, as long as there isn't a spike?
Well, probably if there isn't a spike beyond what it is, and this, if you like, spot fire is put out. But the evidence from overseas and is emerging in Australia as well is that the real cost to the economy is the cost of the virus. And the cost of lockdowns is actually about only 10% of the economic cost. So those numbers put out by Treasury really, in a sense, conflate the cost of the virus as well as the cost of lockdowns. The key thing is, if the virus is running throughout the economy, if people are getting sick, that's the huge jolt, negative jolt to consumer and business confidence, and that a lockdown is essentially a smart investment in the economy of the future if it's done in a clear and clean way that gets rid of the virus or gets it under control.
When you're referring to the cost of the virus, are you talking about the loss of human life?
I'm talking about the loss of human life, but also just the loss of economic activity, just the loss of people not wanting to go out, people not wanting to spend money, people being fearful about, are they going to be able to make their next mortgage or rent payment and things like that. And the best evidence out of the US is that about 90% of the cost to the economy itself, setting aside lives, which are obviously crucially important, 90% of the economic cost is from the virus, not from the lockdowns.
So everyone at the moment is pretty much in this kind of survival mode where we're living day to day, or at least week to week, amid this pandemic. How long could the economic ramifications be? I mean, at the moment we're looking at kind of monthly job figures and that sort of thing. How long will we see the ramifications? Are we still going to be talking about this impact in 18 months' time?
I think we're going to be talking about the impact of it until we have a widely deployed vaccine internationally, because until that happens, we're not going to be able to open up the economy to tourism, to international students, to business travel and things like that. And those are important sectors in the economy. If, on the other hand, we could get towards effective elimination within Australia, something that New Zealand's done, something that countries like Taiwan have made big steps towards, if we could get to something like that, and let's be honest, we've had that in several states of Australia for extended periods of time. If we could get back to that, we could have something that where the economy was damaged in a few important sectors, but the rest of the economy returned to normal.
Yeah, the eradication's been such a contentious issue, even in this last week with the politicians. A lot of them don't want to go anywhere near saying elimination completely. So there's obviously so many industries that have been impacted very severely from this. I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. I probably should have given you a heads up for this one. But have we seen any industries that have actually flourished from this?
Well, we have seen some. We're on a Zoom call right now. That company's doing pretty well. Unfortunately, it's not an Australian company. A lot of the digital firms, so Amazon and delivery firms, are doing very well. So Amazon's been doing very well, and companies like Netflix and other parts of the digital economy have done very well. Some Australian companies involved in biotech stand to do very well, depending on what happens in terms of treatments and potentially a vaccine and things like that. But for the Australian economy as a whole, it's obviously a very tough hit.
During April and May, about 310,000 businesses registered in New South Wales. They applied for the JobKeeper. Do you think that we will see those numbers continue to grow, or do you think that it's starting to stabilise?
I think they'll stabilise as long as we can get the public health issues sorted out to an acceptable level. And I think you're right that the issue about whether we call it elimination or eradication or controlled suppression, basically, if we have very few or no cases of community transmission in a given area like New South Wales, like Queensland, if we have that close to zero or effectively zero, then people will start to get back to normal, except for industries that involve international travel.
At the moment, right now in New South Wales, we're still under some restrictions. We're not completely back to normal. Do you think we could stay in this particular holding pattern, I guess, for a while? Would that be enough to give, I think probably the hospitality industry, I mean, you can't stand up and drink still, you can't go to a bar, you still have to be sitting down. So that would definitely be one of the industries that's still very, very heavily impacted. But do you think that this holding pattern would be good enough to maybe not see a huge spike in boost in the economy, but at least to provide enough to keep everyone going?
I think it should provide enough to keep almost everyone going. But again, if we have these outbreaks, and the Victorian outbreak really seems to have been imported from overseas through kind of bungled hotel quarantine. If those sort of things happen, that's just what's hugely damaging. It makes people very fearful of going to a pub, even if it's seated, going to a restaurant and things like that. And so we can be in this holding pattern, but to get better than that, we really need to stop having imported infections.
You know, I was even at the New South Wales press conference yesterday, and Dr. Kerry Chant was saying, let's not punish the businesses that have actually had COVID cases. So, for example, the Crossroads Hotel, they are actually reopening, I think, today or tomorrow after deep cleaning. There's a number of restaurants that are named in the media. And unfortunately, everyone's first reaction is to steer clear of those places for a prolonged period of time, which can have incredible ramifications on them.
Well, I think that's very important to understand. If people have played by the rules and done, acted in accordance with the guidelines, then they shouldn't be punished. For them, it's really bad luck. I think it's businesses the very small handful who don't abide by the guidelines and play by the rules, all these instances of where, quarantine is breached by individuals or in a more systematic way. Those are the people we should be upset with, and those are the people who should be held to account.
Just finally, so if we do see that $200 million blow to the economy each day in New South Wales, what would that look like? Is that kind of completely, even if we do see a spike in cases and we have to do that, would that just be absolutely diabolical for the state?
No, I think what's important to remember in that is, roughly speaking, $20 million a day of that would come from the lockdown. $180 million a day would come from the blow to confidence from the virus starting to re-emerge in the community. What we would need to do if it gets really, even more serious, sort of Victoria-like in New South Wales, is take a very painful 4 or so weeks to get it under control, lock down, and get back to where we were. And that's very hard for people because we thought we'd done that. People had taken a very painful hit, and it's affected some more than others, of course. And we thought we were back to, if not normal, back to, as you said, a kind of holding pattern. But, we've seen what happens when people relax. You look at what's going on in the United States now. It's tragic, both in terms of human life and in terms of the economy.